Excuse me, Dr. Aldrin. I'm sorry, there wasn't a door, so I
don't believe in barriers because I always break them.
Yeah.
Okay, Buzz Aldrin. I do know Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
Buzz Aldrin said, I want to come on your show. And I'm not going to get into all the heat. I know he lives here in L.A., and one time I ran into him, but let's leave it at that. And he said, I want to come on your show. And I said, all right, well, come on. And it's the only interview he said it. And he goes, I'm going to tell you, Alex, and your audience alone. He said, there is an obelisk, just like 2001. It's on the moon of Mars, the sole moon, and it's sending a transmission. And it's all real, and it's all Egypt, and there's aliens and everything else.
Buzz Aldrin, Magnificent Desolation. And he really doesn't need much of an introduction. What a doctor, colonel in the military, one of the first guys to walk on the moon with Neil Armstrong. Just amazing here. I'm going to skip this network break. You cover a lot of this in Magnificent Desolation, which is a magnificent book. But something I saw you get really excited about was on C-SPAN. You talked about this monolith on the tiny potato-shaped moon of Mars, and I knew about its moon. I didn't know about this monolith, and you got really sparkly-eyed and animated about this.
We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there.
Tell us about this monolith and why you want to land on that moon first.
Well, I want to land on the moon first, whether it has a monolith or not, because it orbits around Mars in 7 hours and is quite close, much closer than our moon is to the Earth. And from that moon, people can control robots, rovers, all sorts of assembly processes, chemical processes, fuel processes, and other things on the surface without endangering the crew, and it's much easier to take people there, actually, than it is to take people to and from our moon. Okay.
What do you think this is? I mean, tell me what your gut, or as a person, a doctor who studies this, what does this look like to you?
It's a big, tall rock. Now, I can say it looks like maybe a crude construction device by some creatures who practiced on Phobos and then landed in Egypt and built the pyramids. I don't really believe that, but some people are liable to think that.
And the Ceres lights, the dwarf planet known for the mysterious lights found in one of its most largest craters, and that we've done many videos on in the past, and I will put a link down in the video description to some of these past videos and the anomalies we found on there. So this picture was sent to me on Twitter, and it's a more high-resolution image of these lights on Ceres, these glowing lights, and the poster of the tweet said, hey, look at this square object just to the right of the massive, largest glowing object in the crater that looks like the monolith that was found on Mars and also Phobos. It definitely looks similar to the monoliths, which are these large, square, towering structures that were found on Mars and Phobos. Now, if you haven't seen those images, here is the, and we're saying monolith in quotations because that's what it looks like. If you've ever seen the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, that is the type of object we're talking about. These large, square, black or white colored pieces of stone or whatever material sticking up out of the ground almost like a monument. So here's the so-called Mars monolith that has got a lot of attention in the past years. And as you can see, it definitely has some similarity to this square object found on Ceres. Now, some have said that these monoliths are markers placed there, showing that whatever planet or moon that has one has been visited or has been occupied. sort of like planting their flag, like we did on the moon. And another monolith that looks very similar is to the one found on Phobos, which is a moon, a very interesting and mysterious moon of Mars.
It's not like the
They just
best.
can't make it.
Nobody went.
There's weird evidence.
Nobody went. The damn thing's not even that far away. Look
Are
at all
you
this-
kidding? Are you kidding?
So, Alex, you think they definitely went to the moon? That just the footage is fake? Is that what you think?
Yeah, you can't bring film back to the Van Allen radiation belt to get spots all over it.
Right, but
Again, it's just amazing getting to talk to you. The book is Magnificent Desolation. Let me bring up one other subject and then end on a very positive note. It's a great book. This has gotten a lot of attention lately. What do you think of the people that mistrust the government and the system so much that they say you guys couldn't have gone to the Van Allen radiation belt and that it was all a Stanley Kubrick film production?
Well, I think they are self-serving individuals looking for attention, preying on gullible people, and they wouldn't exist if it were not for the gullible people who also like to encourage thinking about unrealistic, unsubstantiated things and titillate the public.
My interpretation of The Shining is that there's many levels to this film. This is like three-dimensional chess, and he's trying to tell us several stories that appear to be separate but actually are not. And he's doing this both through the overt script that he wrote. He's telling it through tricks of the trade, the subliminal imagery, and these constant retakes giving him odd angles and things. And he's also telling you through the changes that he made to the Stephen King novel. So if you watch those three things, you begin to understand this deeper story.
we got to figure this out. So what you're saying is the one that we saw on TV with Neil Armstrong, one small step for man, that's all horseshit. But the real one actually took place. They just couldn't get the film back.
But Armstrong had been on real missions.
So yes, he definitely been on real missions. But
I don't know. He wouldn't tell me all of it. He died before we met.
The other dude.
I was
not
meeting
Armstrong.
him the next day, and his wife called. My dad was friends with him and
Neil
said
Armstrong?
Raymond's dead.
No. The other guy. What's his name?
I just got a call during the break from Raymond Teague's wife, who worked with me for a couple of years. It was a good friend of mine. I had dinner with him just about a month ago, and he told me he didn't know how much longer he was going to live. He was walking around on a walker, but had a lot of heart attacks and had like 40-something stents in his heart, and Raymond died an hour ago. And then you'd heard him here a few times on the air, did a lot of amazing stuff in Vietnam, secret stuff, and then worked for NASA and was on Skylab and the Space Shuttle and the Apollo 13 program, the whole Apollo program. Just a treasure trove of info, and Raymond just died an hour ago. We love you, Raymond. We know you're in a better place now, buddy. This is your sources you're dead on. I was in control of the video and radio communications. He was you go to TVs, it's him on TV. I mean, he's running it.
That's very important, the guy controlling the camera.
No, he was on Mission Control 1.
Pretty huge.
They had 2 backups behind that.
Are you kidding? Of course. The moon landings, are you kidding? Come on.
Well, you raised it. You wanted to know.
Oh, come on. That's ridiculous.
No, but
that's why I don't trust the government. That's why I don't trust anything
because
from
they
NASA.
ran a fake op. They didn't want to spend money. They ran a fake op with just re-entry devices and basic stuff in space and did shoot some of it. But then they had a real mission that put the reflectors and everything on the moon. We went to the moon, bro.
There's no proof.
Preserve the possibility that some things were horseshit based on a lot of photographic evidence that they did fuck with.
Well, here's
like
the thing.
Gemini photos.
Yeah, but here it is. Here it is. If you look at like the fuel that was loaded up into the Saturn V rocket, you can calculate where that fuel could take that rocket. It's to the moon and back. So they're not going to the Piggly Wiggly, right?
Yeah.
In the Saturn V.
No, I'm a retard. Listen, if anybody has any real sense, they would look at it and say, "There's no way that was a hoax. There's no way." But
it would be harder. See, people think it was actually hard to get to the moon. Yes, it was. It was hard, certainly, but it would have been way harder to hoax it.
yes, today. But the thing about hoaxing things back then, the thing that was so compelling to me was that hoaxing things back then was really sort of the way they did it. I mean, that's how they got into the Gulf of Tonkin. That's
you fake news stories. You know,
there was a lot of fakery going on back then.
You're faking news.
It was the height of the Cold War. And there was a lot of reasons why I thought some fuckery was afoot. And especially all these goddamn documentaries.
Okay, so you're saying you felt justified just because the landscape in which other things had been happening.
That and visual stuff.
Because that was the decade where we lost confidence in our government.
Yeah.
You know, that was where
for good reason.
Steeper story has its birth, I guess, in the idea that Stanley Kubrick was involved with faking the Apollo moon landings. In fact, I contend that 2001: A Space Odyssey, in part, was a research and development project for the Apollo footage that was shot. I'm not saying we didn't go to the moon. I'm just saying that what we saw was faked, and that it was faked by Stanley Kubrick. It would special effects people from the 60s and 70s who were front screen projection experts tell me that I absolutely have nailed the Apollo footage as being the result of front screen projection. Just go to any Apollo site and look, and you will see that they have to hide the bottom of the screen, and you can always see the set screen separation line in every Apollo footage, every Apollo image, and the video footage that has a background. And Richard Hoagland, the researcher, has looked into the Apollo imagery, and he has found all sorts of problems with it, because in the sky around the astronauts he's found reflecting lights and refracting things and kind of a junk and geometry and things that are in the sky, and he concluded wrongly that there are gigantic alien cities made out of glass. What he's really saying is the reflections of light off the tiny beads on the Scotch-Light screen, which is being used in the front screen projection process. And so once I nailed the front screen projection process inside the Apollo footage, then I became interested in seeing if Kubrick left any clues in the rest of his career to his possible involvement in faking the Apollo moon footage. And I was overjoyed about 2 years ago when I received my Blu-ray copy of The Shining, and I put it in my Blu-ray machine and sat down one night to watch it, and I realized that all of the things that one could imagine that Stanley Kubrick would have had to go through to fake the Apollo moon footage. And there in the movie, every time that Stanley deviated from the Stephen King novel, he deviated into those exact questions. You know, what was it like to make a deal with the U.S. government? What was it like to accidentally tell someone what you were doing and to watch them possibly have to suffer the consequences of your lack of integrity? What was it like to lie to your wife and tell her that you were doing one thing when you were doing another? What was it like when your wife found out what you were really doing? These are the questions that I had long before I'd seen The Shining again after maybe an 8 or 9 year absence. And I wasn't sure I was right for the first hour. I wasn't sure that I had actually, I wasn't sure if I was blurring the line between what I wanted to see and what I was seeing. And then at about 58 minutes in the film is the famous scene where Danny's playing with his trucks, and he stands up and he's wearing the Apollo 11 sweater with a rocket taking off. Then I knew I had nabbed it. And then I started watching the film with an intensity that I don't think I've ever watched a movie before. And every line began ringing true. Wendy, that is just so typical of you. Don't you know I have obligations to my employers? Do you have any idea what a contract is? Do you know what an agreement is?
And are you concerned about me?
Of course I am.
Of course you are. Have you ever thought about my responsibilities?
Oh, Dick, what are you talking about?
Have you ever had a single moment's thought about my responsibilities? Have you ever thought for a single solitary moment about my responsibilities to my employers? Has it ever occurred to you that I have agreed to look after the Overlook Hotel until May the 1st? Does it matter matter to you at all that the owners have placed their complete confidence and trust in me, and that I have signed a letter of agreement, a contract, in which I have accepted that responsibility? Do you have the slightest idea what a moral and ethical principle is, do you?
Jack Nicholson's whole tirade against his wife, that's Stanley. That's Stanley telling his wife that, you know, after she discovered what he was doing, which was the Apollo footage. No, that's actually not true. If you call the Mount Hood Resort and you ask for room 217, you will find there is no such room. So that's just not true. That statement's not true. And so what Stanley was lying. You know, it's not the reason that he changed the room number from 217 to 237. The reason that he changed it from 217 to 237 was because the room 237 in the film represents the moon landing stage where he worked. And the moon, the standard science textbooks said, and they still say, but now with lasers we've gotten a little better reading, but is that the mean distance of the moon from the Earth is exactly 237,000 miles. So he changed that so that you would understand that this was the moon room. So Danny stands up. He's got the Apollo 11 sweater on. He begins walking down the hallway towards room 237, and there's a key in the lock, and on the key is the words room and then the word NO, which is an old acronym for number, so room number 237, except that the only capital letters on the key are ROOM and then the N from the acronym NO. And if there's only two words that you can come up with that have those letters in them, and that's moon and room. And so on the key, the tag, it says moon room. And that is the moon room. This is where everything happens, and none of it's real. And it all has to be lied about. And we can't let anyone know what's really going on in room 237.
I have a real problem with The Shining, and Stanley Kubrick knew that I had a problem with The Shining. I had a discussion with him beforehand. He said, "Stephen, Stanley Kubrick here. Don't you agree that all stories of ghosts are fundamentally optimistic?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, if there are ghosts, it means we survive death, and that's fundamentally an optimistic view, isn't it?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Kubrick, what about hell?" And there was a long pause on the telephone line, and then he said in a very stiff and very different voice, "I don't believe in hell." And I thought to myself, well, that's fine, but some of us do, and some of us believe that ghosts may survive, and that may be hell. And that was sort of where I was coming from with The Shining. But in the novel, The Shining, Jack Torrance is a difficult character, but he's fundamentally a sympathetic character. And I always visualized him as a piece of metal that's bent first one way and the other by these malignant spirits who basically want his son because his son is a psychically powerful person. So I saw these all as warm characters, characters that were being threatened by forces from without, from ghosts, from real supernatural creatures. And the film is extremely cold. Stanley Kubrick saw The Haunting as coming from Jack Torrance, from the Jack Nicholson character, whereas I always saw it from outside. So we had a fundamental difference of opinion about it. I always thought that the real difference between my take on it and Stanley Kubrick's take on it was this. In my novel, the hotel burns. In Kubrick's movie, the hotel freezes. It's a difference between warmth and cold. But the images are striking. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Jack Nicholson's face in the doorway, his bearded, crazy, grinning face, and he says, "Here's Johnny," which was his ad lib, and it became part of the movie. So the images are striking, but to me that's surface, it's not substance. So I used to describe The Shining, the film, as something like a beautiful car that had no engine in it.
Many other deviations from the book to the movie.
It isn't real.
The deviations drove Stephen King out of his mind. He just ranted and ranted for years how much he hated The Shining, and he hated it because he'd given Kubrick all this great source material, and Kubrick threw it out. And the whole idea of this is best exemplified by the scene where Dick Halloran is driving up the highway trying to get to the Overlook during a winter storm, and he passes a wreck, and in the wreck a semi has crashed and crushed a red Volkswagen. And this is a direct message from Kubrick to King, because in the novel Jack Torrance's car is a red Volkswagen, but in the movie it's a yellow Volkswagen. And what Kubrick is saying in that scene is a big F-U to Stephen King. He's saying, this is my vehicle, I have wrecked your vehicle, and everybody in the world can see it. And this drove King crazy, and it should have. But what was really going on, and what is just much more deliciously fascinating about all of this, is that in fact Kubrick was faking the making of the Stephen King novel in order to reveal the idea of what he went through to do the Apollo moon footage.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Columbia, this is Houston, AOS, over. Columbia on the high gate, over. Roger, the EVA is progressing beautifully. They're setting up the flag now. I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
So Buzz Aldrin is part of this fraternity of guys who, I don't even know how he gets his flight suit on, the size of this guy's balls. So anyways, this fucking YouTube video, one of those moon conspirator people comes up to Buzz Aldrin and starts calling him a coward and a liar. You're a liar. You're a coward. You never landed on the moon. Right?
Well, you're the one getting money for something you didn't do. You're getting a lecture for walking on the moon when you didn't. Well, that's called being a thief.
And couldn't the Russians be able to figure? That's what I love. The KGB couldn't figure out that we didn't land on the moon, but this tub of shit who's yelling at this fucking war hero, he somehow figured it out. So anyways, he's following the guy around. And not to mention, Buzz at this point is in his 80s. Okay? So now you're yelling at an old man. All right? A fucking tough son of a bitch. But an old, there's a certain level of respect. The same reason why I don't yell at that old fucking coot down below at me. I just don't yell at the guy because he's an old guy. So this guy, this fucking tubby, goddamn fucking, just, last guy picked in gym class, fucking soft serve ice cream eating fag, comes fucking walking up to the guy, just sitting there going like, you're a liar, you're a coward. He said a bunch of things to him. He's following him out of the hotel into the street, and there's this woman, and first time he calls him a coward or something, you watch, Buzz turns around.
Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon? Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon?
It reminded me of like when I'm with my dog, my Pitty, when like she starts fixating and I'm watching the signs that, okay, she's going into pit bull mode. I gotta snap her out of that. It was the same thing. He started walking towards her and the girl fucking pulled him back. No. And this guy wouldn't leave him alone. And Buzz keeps saying, leave me alone. And this guy wouldn't leave him alone. And Buzz keeps saying, leave me alone. Leave me alone. Right? And the guy keeps getting in his face. And then the second time he goes, you're a liar. You're a coward.
You said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself. Away from me. You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
And Buzz fucking right hook to this guy's fat fucking triple cheeseburger eating face. And this guy, I swear to God, was like a foot taller than him and probably outweighed him by 150 fucking pounds, all quarter pounder with cheese though, right? And he just drills this guy in the face. He backs him up like 3 steps as an 81-year-old man. And as much as I hate to admit it, that punch, you look at this punch, I would have fell down. I'm not even going to lie to you. He would have hit me in my big fucking butcher block head, and he would have dropped me. So props to Buzz Aldrin for not only being a hero, for punching a fatty in the face.
I'm sorry if I've disappointed you. Would you like to yell at the moon with Buzz Aldrin?
Yes, please.
I own you!
You dumb moon!
I walked on your face!
Don't you know it's day, idiot?